Well, I'm not in Canada anymore. Here I am hanging out beside a portrait of Peter the Great. Any guesses where I am? This is my first trip outside Canada since 2019. My first stop was the sweet little village of Godalming in Surrey, or Surrey if you're from Canada, in the United Kingdom. I'm staying at a place called the King's Arms, and in case you missed the King's bit, Royal Hotel. There has been an inn in this location for several hundred years, and as you might imagine, after all these years, this place is indeed haunted. As you walk around the hotel, you'll see many, many, many portraits of former monarchs lining the walls, and yes, there are even one or two women. And two of those people, namely, are Peter the Great of Russia and Henry VIII, yes, that Henry VIII, are rumored to haunt this hotel. But I was told that I had nothing to worry about because most of the activity takes place on the ground floor of the hotel, and my room was on the second floor. And yes, I did have a view over the high street from my toilet, or throne, if you will. So I couldn't resist but make my own portraits of those two royals, and just for fun, I made mine into skeletons. And indeed, I did come across quite a few skeletons on this trip. This one is Roman. And this one was an outdoor pottery studio. And I noticed this winged skull in Christchurch Cathedral while I was attending the evening song there. And I think these two fellows in this medieval embroidery look rather skeletal, don't you? And of course, not all skeletons are human, like this dodo. So I'm pretty comfortable cutting out the shape of a skull without using a template or drawing the outlines. It's a pretty simple shape. It's a rounded shape that's narrower at the bottom than at the top. If you've watched my videos about my library scroll, you may have noticed that there are a few skeletons and skulls on that piece in the middle section here, and also in this section on women's health. And I'll leave a link to the playlist of the library scroll videos at the end of this video. Indeed, this section on women's health is very relevant to my visit to Godalming, and I will explain it most likely in the next video in the series about my trip. But now let's go back to our skeleton ghost, shall we? I added some little holes for ear, eye, and nose sockets, and then just started to stitch those down using an overcast stitch. And want to know a secret? It glows in the dark. I use glow-in-the-dark thread. If I can get my camera to pick it up, I'll show you what it looks like in the dark. It's pretty cool. And of course, a royal ghost needs a crown, don't you think? So I pulled out all the sparkly, glittery bits of braid and trim that I have to create a crown. The glow-in-the-dark thread and all these lovely sparkly threads were a gift from one of my lovely viewers, Inga, who contacted me many months ago and said that she had some really gorgeous threads that she wanted to give to me, in huge bags full of silk and metallic and glow-in-the-dark and linen and all kinds of embroidery threads, and I'm really happy to be able to use them in this project here. Well, I couldn't just make one royal ghost, so I made two. I'm not quite sure which one is Peter and which one is Henry, though. And here's how they look glowing in the dark. Now, I didn't just make the two ghosts, I also made this little rabbit, and I've named him Jack. Jack Rabbit makes sense, right? But that's not where his name came from. While I was in Godalming, I visited the town museum, where they have a whole room dedicated to a fellow named Jack Phillips. There's also a pub in town named after him, and I believe a park as well, but I did not visit the park. Now, Jack Phillips was the radio operator on board the Titanic. They seem to be quite proud of Jack in Godalming, but here's the thing. According to some sources, Jack may have, at least in part, have been responsible for the sinking of the Titanic, because as the radio operator, he was responsible for receiving and sending messages. And on the night that the Titanic sank, he had been really busy sending out messages for passengers on board the ship, no doubt passengers in first class, and had failed to pass along 2 messages about ice being in the area. And as a result, the captain did not get those messages, and had he received them, there may have been a different outcome on that night. Who knows? And as interesting as those 2 stories are, they are not the reason that I came to Godalming. I came to Godalming to find out more about somebody who lived here about 200 years ago. Her name was Mary, and I will tell you about her in my next episode. And yes, Julie, that is where I will explain how this all relates to the women's health section of the library scroll that I had been working on last year. But in any case, I made a little rabbit, and a rabbit needs a little fluffy tail on the back. So I made a little pom-pom for Jack's tail, and I've given him a boat to go sailing about in. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this slightly different episode, and I will see you again soon with the story of the 2 Marys. Stay tuned.